Hey everybody, we're here to go ahead and show you how to replace the battery, volume, power button, 3.5mm headphone jack, all on this Nexus 6. So we're going to use a tile suction cup here to help us kind of pull off the back of the device. A few other tools that we're going to use is a heat gun to heat up the back. We'll be using a couple different opening tools, possibly this nylon spudger, maybe this safe opening pry tool. This iSesamo tool, which is awesome. This thing rocks. I would suggest buying one if you repair a lot of phones. And then we'll be using a small Torx screwdriver. This is a 5. It's actually going to be a Torx 4. And a SIM card eject tool to go ahead and pop our SIM card out of the phone. I'm going to go ahead and start with that first. Go ahead and pop out the SIM card tray and remove it and set it aside. The next step is to go ahead and heat up the rear of the device so we can remove it. There's basically adhesive everywhere underneath this thing. So we're going to use our heat gun and get it nice and warm, work our way around the device. Now this heat gun is pretty warm, but we're not going to get it to the point where we're going to melt anything. And honestly, some of these backs are easy to get off and some of them are really difficult to remove. Normally you can tell at the beginning it'll start to kind of pill up if it's going to be really easy to remove. A pry tool will fit underneath nice and easy. But in some cases you'll have to use like the iSesamo tool, something a little bit stronger to go ahead and start the removal process of this. I like to use a suction cup to help me pull it away and kind of give me some leverage room to start with. So now we got it nice and warm. Put our suction cup on here. We're going to use a guitar pick as our opening tool. You can use a safe opening pry tool or a spudger as well. Use a little bit thinner one. See if we can't just get it in here. So I'm pulling back on the suction cup and then pushing down with the pick. It really just doesn't want to get started for us. So it looks like it's going to be a little bit of a tricky one. So we're going to use our iSesamo tool and get that in there. So I'm going to put the tip in and then slide it to the sideways so I get a nice flat portion. That'll help us not damage the side of the phone. Then I'm going to use a guitar pick to go ahead and do the rest. That way we don't damage the bezel of the device and it looks nice and clean when we put it back together. So now that I got that started, I can go ahead and remove the iSesamo tool and start to work my pick around. Now they're using 3M double-sided adhesive inside of here. It's pretty sticky stuff. And the way that the phone's laid out is basically right underneath the Motorola symbol on the back. It's actually put out in two sides. They flap open in the middle. So you want to make sure that when you're using your tool, I'm going to use a nylon spudger to get a little bit further reach in here, that you're on top of the plastic housing of the phone. It's got little round holes cut through it, like it's been drilled out. You want to make sure you stay on top of that at all times. The battery's underneath this. There's a couple of wires that's powered the phone back on. A couple of wires on the phone that you want to be careful of. The first one in the bottom right hand corner here, there's going to be a battery connector. It's covered by a rubber grommet, so we have to stress about it too much. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this back. It's a pretty malleable piece of plastic, the back, but you don't want to bend it, stress factor it in any way. So I'm going to use it just to pull back and see where I can put my spudger. Twist it left and right, kind of rock it and start to get that adhesive to pull off. The next cable that you need to be very careful of is to the left of the camera, down to the Motorola symbol, about middle of the left side of the phone, so be careful there as well. I suggest if you're peeling the back off that you wait and see where those are at before you go too much further. To work our way down, I'm going to put my spudger in here sideways. We're going to give it a little bit more heat here. Looks like the adhesive isn't extremely warm in this area, so we're going to try to get it a little bit warmer to give it a little bit ease of removal. Again, not to the point where we're going to damage or melt anything. We're just getting it nice and warm to the touch. Go ahead and work our way down here again. Like I was saying, it's got basically two flanges, one on the top and one on the bottom. So when you're peeling this back, you want to make sure that you don't put too much stress on that top one as you're peeling away from the bottom. Now, one of the reasons why you're not just going to pull this back off is there is basically a little bit of adhesive that's over the power button connector that connects to the logic board to the volume power, so you want to be careful of that. So we're just using my finger to kind of pull back a little bit. We're getting right to where the flange is going to be at, and we're going to start the new side. We're just going to take a look at where we can put our spudger in, and make sure that we're on top of that piece of plastic. Now we're going to work away from the top now. Now if you don't want your housing to reattach itself to the tape, if the adhesive, you can use a playing card or the guitar picks down there to kind of hold it off. You'll see the amount of adhesive they use to put this back on is pretty incredible. They use a lot. Put our guitar pick in here. We're going to get it nice and warm again. Right now it should be a little bit more pliable. We can go ahead and start to pull this off. So just working my way towards the Motorola logo there. So we can't pull this back now. So you can see right here is the ribbon cable that you need to be very careful of on the right where my nylon spudger is at currently. So I'm putting my finger on it to hold it down. There's a little bit of adhesive that was on it that was pulling it back. You want to be careful to damage that cable. And now the power button's under the grommet there at the top right hand corner on the screen. So you can see that they put adhesive all the way through here. Basically anywhere there's not a hole has adhesive on the back of this. All the way around. Now you can see that we have many screws here. Now we're going to mess with these connectors just a little bit. So we'll pull off whatever residual adhesive is here. So go ahead and just power my phone off again before I take the battery grommet off. Right here's the battery grommet. Now it's pretty hard to damage this when you're removing the back, but you just want to be careful with it. Don't want to pop the grommet up and damage this connector under here. It just pulls right up from this front side, and that'll go ahead and disconnect the battery and now make it so you don't turn your phone on anymore. Remove this connector up here, this grommet. And this connector connects the power volume rocker to the logic board, so we're just going to go ahead and pull it up as well. There's a little piece of Kapton tape on top of this connector here. If this pulls up from the back forward, you can remove the tape. I find that it's not really necessary majority of the time. Once you have it pulled up, you can go ahead and just remove the volume button, power button cable. Now actually you don't even have to remove that cable, you just need to unclip it from the motherboard. I do both just because I don't want to damage the cable when I'm working here. Now we're going to undo all of the screws off the back of this with this Torx 4 screwdriver. There are 22 of these screws in the back. The nice thing is that they all are universal. It doesn't matter where you take them out, but you do have to take them all out, and that is a lot. You always want to make sure you're using the correct size screwdriver. I see a lot of things saying that this is a Torx 3 screw, but this is actually, in my screwdriver, a Torx 4 is a better fit. And I want to make sure I don't strip any screws out. About halfway done, just working our way around the sides here. Now the one screw that you can leave in is for the power button volume rocker. You don't have to undo that screw. If you do, then your buttons are going to want to pop right out. Your hand's going to be a little bit tired by the time you get done with this. Got a couple deeper inset screws here. To the left of the camera. To the right of the camera. So just double check and make sure before you start trying to pry it out that you didn't miss one. Like this one here. Look at all the screw holes and just make sure they're all out. You don't want to damage anything or trying to remove the back off of here. And this right here is why you double check. Missed one down here at the bottom. Just doing a quick count to make sure I had them all. Alright, looking good. So now that we have that portion done, we're going to go ahead and separate the bezel from the screen assembly. And where the blue and the black meet is right where it's going to be. Just use a guitar pick or a safe opening tool and work your way down. Be careful of the volume, power up, power down buttons. And just work your way around. I'll go ahead and unclip from this back here. There we go. Go ahead and set that aside. So I'm going to go ahead and work with the battery frame portion of this. So you can see that we have our camera assembly. This is our volume power button, extender ribbon cable, and the buttons themselves. Let's go ahead and show you how to take that off first. This grommet's still in here. I'm just going to remove this grommet here real fast. So we're going to take a look at how to remove the power button, volume button assembly, the buttons themselves, as well as the ribbon cable. We're going to use our Torx 4 screwdriver and go ahead and remove the screw that's holding the metal bracket in. Now we're going to take something sharp and go ahead and pull this metal bracket out that's holding the buttons in place. You'll see that it has kind of two nubs on either side, one fitting into the power button, one fitting into the volume button. Once you remove that, they'll go ahead and slide right out for you. See that we have our volume button and our power button removed. That'll go ahead and reveal on this back side here, you can see a little metal bracket that the power button and volume button ribbon cable is attached to. Now you can use something a little bit sharper for this, maybe a push pin or dental pick, something that you can get into a very tight space with. You can also use a SIM card eject tool. It might just be a little bit trickier to get in there. You want something fairly pointy. I'll make it a little bit easier to get this removed out of the slot that it's in. So we're going to use our pick here and to start on the side, pulling up on the metal bracket, not on the cable itself. So you're starting to make a little bit of headway. Pull up on the back side, which is the metal side of the bracket. That'll go ahead and pull right out for us. All you would need to do with your new cable, if you're replacing the power button, volume buttons, is go ahead and pull this cable off of the bracket, pull back the backing off the new cable, and just re-adhere it onto this. It's both are one cable. Then go ahead and take the cable, put it back through the slot hole here, and you just go ahead and push it back into place. Fairly simple replacement, which is nice. Now when looking to go ahead and reinsert this in, the way it came out was the red nub on the power button was facing towards the back of the phone. I don't think it really matters. It looks like they're exactly the same. Just put them in and make sure the buttons are depressing correctly. Then put it down nice and gently. We're going to go ahead and get our bracket. See my volume button pop back out there. I'm going to go ahead and get our bracket and put it back in place. You'll notice that it only fits in one direction, the shorter side towards the top and the longer side towards the bottom. Make sure the bracket goes into the holes, holding the power button and volume button into the frame of the phone. Go ahead and take our screwdriver and put our torque screw back in. It's a pretty simple replacement for the power button volume. Then all you would need to do is go ahead and reconnect your ribbon cable. Go ahead and pull this flap forward. Hold it with your fingers. Be careful, it is fairly easy to break. Put the new cable in and pull the flap down. Pretty simple. Alright, the next thing we're going to go ahead and do is take a look at the 3.5mm headphone jack. See, there's no cables connecting it here. So we're just going to take our nylon spudger and stick it in the jack hole and just pull towards the bottom. You'll see it start to lift up and give you enough room to slide in right on the side of it. It has this little rubber housing on it that you can go ahead and remove all the way off. Go ahead and put it back inside of the housing. You see that it cups around the front, and then the back side will pull all the way down across the back of the jack. Pretty simple to reassemble this, so if you do have any faulty jack problems, take this. You want to insert it nose first into the slot, press it on the back, and then press down. And the grommet will actually kind of fit itself back onto the framing. It'll have a little indent hole it goes into. Just make sure you press it in that it fits back in properly. Let's go ahead and take a look at the battery. Now, you want to be a little bit careful when you remove this. There is the wireless charging portion here. You want to make sure you get underneath that when removing the battery. So just wiggling it back and forth, making sure that I stay on top. Trying to find an open slot hole in the back where I won't be damaging any of the additional ribbon cables back there. Right here, where the indentation is where the Motorola logo would be, there is adhesive right there. That's what I'm working on right now. So we've got the whole top half done. You can see that it's the little flange at the bottom here, and the connector doesn't want to pop out. So we're going to go ahead and put our spudger underneath the battery cable connector. Let's try to work itself out. You want to be careful. It's a pretty thin ribbon connection on this. Just taking our time. I'm pulling it back. Trying to get it started here. If you are going to use something pointy like a dental pick, make sure the end is rounded and it's not sharp. Now we have a pretty good amount pulled up here, so we can use our spudger to try to get underneath it again. Alright, so now you can see that the whole flap wants to pull up, so we need to undo the bottom half. We're going to start on the top side of the frame to make sure that we go over the wireless charging portion. And there's adhesive on the wings of this back portion here. You can see it starting to slide away. There you have it. Now if you're looking to replace this wireless charging portion here, this basically just peels back. Off of the device or the battery itself. It has a ribbon cable that wraps around. Now it's almost stuck onto something that seems like a little piece of weather stripping. A little bit tougher than that, so it's as thin as the ribbon cable we just removed at the top, so you want to be careful as you're pulling this off. There we go. Not extremely hard to remove, and replacement of the battery is pretty easy as well. Now if you're looking to reuse this, you'll have to use a little bit of adhesive to hold it back onto this portion of the phone here. So we're just going to use a small piece of double-sided 3M adhesive, or this is actually VHB tape. It's basically the same thing, so just putting down a little strip of it. Just going to cut it flat. Pull the backing off of it. And put our cable back on. Make sure it's nice and straight when we line it up here. Want to make sure that those contacts make the correct connection points when we put the phone back together. Making sure to line up this wireless charging on the back as well to where it used to be. Alright, one last thing we can also take a look at is this speaker here. If we do have any issues with the speakers, they're pretty easy to remove. Usually just pop right out. So ribbon cable you can see here, so if you do need to remove this, you can use your pick to pull this out. Our camera lens here, which is in pretty snug. Go ahead and put our speaker back in. Put our battery back in. And that's a replacement of these back pieces within the frame. Normally the battery will have enough adhesive. It doesn't have adhesive to hold it back on. You can just use some of that 3M double-sided tape or VHB tape to reconnect it as well. Now with all those components back in, you can see that the ribbon cable here for the battery is nice and flush and where it should be. We'll go ahead and start the reassembly of the phone. And our next step is to take our housing assembly. We'll go ahead and snap that on. Now if you wanted to see how to remove the battery or the volume power button, I'll have a separate video for that. So we're just going to make sure everything kind of lines up, all the screw holes are there. Just go ahead and push it down. It'll kind of snap back into place in a couple of spots up here at the top. It'll go ahead and snap back in. Mostly down the sides, it doesn't have any real snapping. It kind of feels a little flimsy when you put it back together until you put all of those 22 screws back in, right? So what we're going to do before we do much more is we're going to put 2 screws in down here at the bottom, and then we're just going to test it and make sure that it powers on and the touch function's working. And if I were you, before I put the back on, I would test every feature of this phone to make sure that everything's working before we put down about 1,000 strips of adhesive to put the back onto this phone again. Just put a couple in down here at the bottom. Make sure it's nice and snug, and then we can go ahead and flip it over and power it on. We're going to go ahead and put our power connector on. And then we'll go ahead and put our ribbon cable extender for the power volume on. I find it easier to do this with a spudger. What I do is I put the spudger against the crease in the cable and pull it back and then push it in with my finger. So pushing the cable back a little bit, and then just trying to find that sweet spot in here. Sometimes you can use your spudger to push it on as well. So we're just going to go ahead and power the display on. You might want to put a couple sporadic screws in the back to make sure all the connections are being touched. We'll just let it power on here for just a few seconds. Alright, here we go. Oh, and it's in Espanol. We'll go ahead and change that back to English. Perfect. So the screen is functioning for us. Power button's functioning for us as well. Now, if I were, like I was saying, if I were you, I'd go through and test all of the functions, the Wi-Fi, your charge port, all that stuff. Make sure that it's functioning properly for you. The next thing we're going to do is go ahead and put all the remaining screws in the back of this. This will take a few seconds to do, so just bear with me while I do this real quick. Now, I could fast forward through this, but I'd rather give you an ideal time of how long it takes to do one of these builds. So I'm not going to fast forward. If you want to fast forward to the next portion, I can probably skip ahead about a minute and a half and should not miss anything. Now, when you put in these screws in, you don't have to put them in extremely tight. They just need to be nice and snug. You also don't want to strip them out, as some of the smaller Torx screws are notorious for doing with a bit. Either the bit itself strips out or the screws themselves strip. So just put them in with a decent amount of pressure just to make sure they stay in. They have a little thread locker on them, so they shouldn't screw back out. But don't try to force them in too tight. Alright, now that we have all of the screws put in, what the next step is we're going to remove some of the adhesive off of the back of this phone. Now, what you could do is if you have enough adhesive on here and it came off perfectly in one piece, you could technically put it back together without putting down new adhesive. I wouldn't necessarily suggest that. These phones have the issue of having the back come off already. It's kind of a reported issue with the Nexus 6 is that the back itself will kind of pull away from the phone. Some handsets have had that issue, kind of like the bend gate with iPhones. So what I like to do is put down new adhesive. What I'm going to do is basically take my spudger and remove all of this 3M double-sided adhesive. It does come off in one piece normally. I'm going to do this on the back of the phone and also off the back panel, a battery cover to this device as well, which takes a little bit longer. There's usually a lot more on that than there is on this. So I'm just going to take my time and scrape all of the adhesive off of here. That way I don't get any lumps or weird features on the back of my phone when I'm done fixing it. Now it doesn't have to be exactly perfect, but you want to get off as much as you can, so if you have any small pieces struggling on there, you may want to pull it off a little bit. Try to rub it to be nice and flat. being a little bit tricky. This does not want to come off. All right. Alright, now that we got the majority of the adhesive off the phone, we're going to use some extra wide double-sided adhesive. We'll use some 5mm 3M double-sided adhesive. We're just going to cut it to fit the back of this. So I'm going to round the edges of some and put it down here across the bottom, just to kind of fit the corners. Now the corners are pretty important. You want to make sure that you get a lot of adhesive down in there. So make sure they're cut to fit and rounded so they kind of get into those round sides. Work our way down. Now, we're going to put a massive amount of adhesive on this thing. As you saw how much was on there when we first removed it, we're going to put down something similar to that so we don't have any lifting or any issues of the back of the phone wanting to come off. It doesn't have to be extremely pretty, but I would make it as uniform as possible. You don't want to have any squishy spots on the back of your phone where you can tell there's no adhesive behind it. Oh, missed a piece here. Let's go ahead and pull that off. So anything I can put a longer straight line of adhesive in is what I'm going to put stuff on. Make it a little bit easier. Go ahead and work our way down the sides. Now one thing you want to make sure that you don't do is that it rides up the side of the phone. You don't want any issues trying to put the back on or it wanting to kind of lift back off with any wrinkles in the tape or you put it up the side of the frame. So just make sure that you can leave a little bit of a gap around it. Just make sure you put it on nice and as uniform as possible. Perfect. Let's put some strips down here. And really the original backing almost had tape everywhere there wasn't a round cutout or hole in the back of this thing, so we want to make sure we put a decent amount of adhesive on there to hold everything back in. Right now that we got the majority of the middle portion of the phone, we're going to go ahead and do the same thing we did at the bottom, round some of the edges here, and work our way across the top. Now this does bend a little bit, and sometimes this 3M tape will let you move it around a little bit, let you bend it. Sometimes it's with this wider tape, it's a little too tricky to do, so you may have to, see my scissors are getting sticky, I'm going to have to clean them there. You may have to put in a couple different pieces of tape here to meet this bend up here at the top. Now it also had original adhesive around the camera lens, so you're going to want to put a decent amount around the camera area to make sure that you get a good adhesive seal. That way you don't have the back kind of flopping around back near the camera. I'm going to put some smaller pieces just around the center point here. This is where the Motorola logo kind of indents into this center hole. So we want to make sure that you're going to put your finger in that spot a lot. And you're holding your phone most likely, so you want to make sure that you put a decent amount of tape to hold all that in. And I'm not going to tape over this connector. I'm a little sketchy about taping over these ribbon cable connectors. If I ever have to open this phone up again, I don't want to cause any damage to it. Now just go ahead and fill in any little gaps that you see that you think might need a little extra tape to help it retain its form. Go ahead and put a nice strip up here. Well, just checking that piece. Put a strip down here at the bottom to make sure that it has this functionality. There's two spots in here that have a kind of a weird color. One in the upper left hand corner and then one down here at the bottom left. I didn't tape over those as well. Getting close here. Alright, we're looking good. We have a lot of tape on here, so it looks like it's going to hold up pretty nice. The next tricky part is go ahead and remove all the backing off of this tape. Just like I was saying, make sure that it doesn't wrinkle when you pull it up. To do that, I found the easiest way is to press down on the side that you're going to remove and then pull back on it. And that'll make sure the tape doesn't want to lift back up with the backing that you're removing. And we'll pull all the backing off of this. Alright, we are almost done. Just one more piece of backing to go. Then we can take the back of our phone here and put it on. Now remember, I did clean off all the adhesive on the back side of this. We can go ahead and put that on so you can see it's nice and clean. Start here at the top, make sure those corners fit in, and then work our way down the sides of the phone. Make sure that it's spread all the way out. Then we can press into the middle of the phone and work our way through. Now if you found this video helpful, go ahead and hit that like button. I appreciate it. If you want to see future repair videos, hit the subscribe button. If you have any questions about the repair, go ahead and throw them down in the comments. Like I was saying, I'll have the power, volume button, the battery in the description if you want to watch that video as well. As always, I appreciate you watching, and I hope you see them on the next one.